Hey, it's Lou Brutus. Always a pleasure to welcome Jonny Hawkins of Nothing More. You look tropical to me because of that backdrop. Where exactly are you?
I have no idea where I am, to be honest. But we're actually doing a bunch of press stuff here at some undisclosed location. If you want to look around, uh, there's the other guys. There's Ben and Dan. Say hello. But yeah, good to see you again, Lou. Where are you at?
I am outside of Washington, D.C., in my quiet little neck of the woods. I live down on a peninsula out jutted into the Chesapeake Bay, so there's nothing but horse farms and turf
Ooh.
farms and plenty of places for me and Darla, the wonder dog, to walk around.
That sounds nice. My dad lives up in that area.
Oh, very good. Oh, next time you're around, let's
Yeah,
let's go hang out.
that'd be cool.
So, but I've got to say this in the right way. I don't want it to sound awkward, but these last couple of years has been tough for everybody, and it's certainly been tough in the rock and roll world. But Nothing More is one of the bands that I feel especially, I don't want to say sorry for, but I feel it most acutely because you were one of the groups that was just exploding when all of this stuff hit, and then suddenly, bam, nothing's going on. There's no tours, and chances for press and everything go away. So kind of walk me through what your mindset was as you go in to start to do new music and sort of restart the machinery again.
Yeah, it was a blessing and a curse kind of a thing when COVID and everything happened because the timing was good in one way that we had been touring a bunch the previous years and building a lot of momentum, and we were about to stop and work on an album anyway. So if it was gonna happen, that was the best time for it to happen for us. It's not like we had to cancel a giant international tour or something. At the same time, um, it made it challenging, as it did, I'm sure, for everyone, especially for us because we're uh, separated from each other more than we ever had been in the past. I've been living in Louisiana. Ben is living in Arizona. Dan and Mark are in San Antonio, Texas. And so we had to kind of go through a learning curve of how to work together mobily and really get our ideas out without sacrificing any quality. So we did learn a lot of skills along the way, but it was a very frustrating process because it wasn't native to what we usually do. And there was a lot of travel involved as time went on. But uh, we also just were using this time to kind of gather ourselves and regroup. We just been on the road for so long that I think we all needed a little bit of normalcy and kind of some home time, and to feel that so we could really come out with a full tank of gas, in our soul and in our bones.
Yeah, that certainly makes all the sense in the world because so many bands album tour, album tour, album tour, album tour. Next thing you know, you've been essentially stuck in the same room together for 8 years and you want to gouge each other's eyeballs out, even though you love one another. I mean, that's how it
Oh
goes
yeah.
playing in a band, as AC/DC would say. So it's nice for the battery
Yeah.
recharge. So how do you take that pent up energy that you have now and then turn it into a record?
Well, we pretty much had a lot of these songs in the works for quite some time now. It was really just getting the sound of the album right, which took us a little longer this time. But like all good things, it takes time, and we finally found the sound we were looking for. We had mixes of songs, for quite some time now, but they just didn't feel quite right. And
Mm.
it's one of those industries where it's very qualitative versus quantitative. And if the quality of what we're putting out is not right, it doesn't matter how many music videos and how much marketing and how many photo shoots we do. None of that matters if the product itself is not the art that's right and it doesn't feel right. And so we were searching for some things on this one because we wanted to push ourselves in some ways that we didn't in the past. And we finally found that. And we're finally gearing up, and all the pistons are firing now, and we're about to hit it again. I just want to say to anyone watching who's a nothing more, fan, to thank you for your patience, because I know it's been quite some time and we've teased a lot along the way. But it just to let you know, it did take longer than we even thought it would. We ran into some challenges along the way, professionally and personally, but we finally made it through the other side, and feel like a whole new band. So I'm excited.
When it came to the rough patches, trying to figure out a sound, how much of that had to deal with the sort of percussive aspects of the band's sound? Because I know sound men and live shows sometimes that can give you a bit of a problem, just miking everything and getting a mix right. Is that the kind of thing, at least partially, that held you up?
Yeah, it's also just a lot of it held up was the aesthetic of the sound, and that's a lot of, we each have different roles in the band, and that is a big area that I take a lot of responsibility in, and also pride in. And when you listen to like a System of a Down album and you compare the way that sounds to something different, like I don't know, a Metallica album or a Foo Fighters album, the way the drums are presented and the vocals presented, and it's still a drum set, it's still a guitar, it's still a vocal. It's really how those ingredients are presented to your ear that really differentiates the sound. And that's was the thing that kind of became the bottleneck. That it's very easy to go to an established producer or a mix engineer, which we did with a few things, and get your product back and it sounds like 10 other bands that went through the same filter, and you don't feel that sense of that qualitative uniqueness.
Uniqueness,
And
yeah.
yeah, so we were really searching and making sure that part of it was right, and that we don't want to sound like the last album that came out and we're chasing another band's sound. We wanted to sound like our own sound on this album that took a step forward from the last two albums, and have other bands want to sound like us, rather than the other way around. And that just took some time.
And then as you're creating music, and this could be a thing, through the years for Nothing More, but as you're writing and recording, are you thinking in the back of your mind, well, how the hell are we going to pull this off live? Or how is this going to be as a live song?
I think that's always a question that enters your mind when you're going through this process, because we don't really limit ourselves when we're making the album. We don't go, oh, how are we going to do this live, or how is this going to work? We find that those kind of limitations just get in the way of making what people want, which is as good of an album as you can possibly make, because that in and of itself is its own experience. The album is a personal experience with the listener, and how we present it live that's a whole nother layer to the art of this thing and how we're going to accomplish it. So there are moments where it's like, okay, I don't quite know how we're going to do this or approach this, but I'm not worried about it. We always figure it out. And if it's not exactly the same, you just figure out, it's almost like taking a movie and making a play out of it. The way you address the audience, the way you look at them is very different than looking at a camera. It's a different medium. The way you move your body has to be more exaggerated. You have to, it's like a book going to film. They have to cut out certain chapters. So it's really just like one of those kind of processes. It's a different form and a different presentation of the same song.
I've never heard anybody use that analogy, and it's fucking spot on. It's like, it makes perfect sense. That was really good. I'm going to steal that for other questions and with other artists in the years to come, I hope. So I'd love to ask you about some specific songs, and any sort of background on them that you can give me would be great. First would be Turn It Up.
Yeah, so Turn It Up is it's our slap you in the face track on the album. This is the one that's just a jolt of cold water to wake up our fan base, to wake up music listeners in general, and just to say, hey, look over here. It's just a wake up call. It's just packed full of adrenaline and piss and vinegar. It's just all the frustration, all the pent up aggression and energy that seemed to have nowhere to go the last 2 years, it's all coming out in this song.
And this song smells like an album opener. It smells like a set opener live.
Yeah, you nailed it. It definitely is going to be.
Excellent. Is the record entirely sequenced yet, by the way?
Yeah, we have pretty much probably a final draft of the sequence. We go through a few different sequences and play with some things and listen to how the lyrics flow from one song to another and how it feels just kind of as a body of work. And I think we're at the final one. We're going to be what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought, but yeah, I think we're at the final one. That's pretty much it.
And by the way, sequencing a record is always fun because everybody always totally agrees on everything between the band and management, record companies and stuff. And nobody ever argues about those things.
Right. Correct. Just like most things, we all agree on everything all the time. Never
really.
a fight.
How was the process for real though?
Our point of view is always start the momentum and the energy with the people that are already with you and have it emanate from there outward. Let's preach to the choir. Let's get the choir, singing. Let's get them on our side and preaching and proselytizing to the rest of the world. And let's work our way out from there. And that's why we think something like Turn It Up has that energy, that excitement that some of the other songs that we love just as much just have a different energy and a different kind of place. So and then the label, they're thinking way more about radio and how many spins it's going to get and how much it's going to do at streaming. And those are more songs that have a melody or a replayable quality, or how they see it play into people's lives and playlisting. And so they lean towards other songs for that reason. And so there's just, same thing. We both want success, just different objectives at different times sometimes.
One other tune you mentioned I'd like to get a bit more background on is Tired of Winning.
Yeah. So this one, the title of this track was actually a joke. Like when we are writing demos and working on versions of songs, we just name them random things. And sometimes it's an inside joke. Sometimes it's partially related to the concept of the song. And it was one of those things that was a total accident and just us being playful that kind of ended up relating to the concept and the topic of this song, which was one of a nihilistic yet optimistic turning point in humanity, because there's this nihilistic what's the word, pessimistic kind of outlook at humanity as a whole, especially over the last few years. And just, it's so easy to see all the bad in it and see we're in this chaos phase. And just like in the music industry, when it went through the streaming phase, the transition from albums to streaming, that was the chaos phase. Nobody knew how it was going to suss out. Nobody knew how we were going to monetize this thing and make, our business still float while we're not selling albums. And then at some point it kind of settled out. And I think we're going through that phase right now, culturally, politically, interpersonally, with everything on the internet. And just we're learning to adapt to this social media culture still and how we interface with it. And so in all of that, it got poured into really both of Tired of Winning and Turn It Up. But Tired of Winning, we thought we'd go with more like more of a triggering title. So that's why we kept it. Because as we all know, Trump is probably the most polarizing, triggering figure in our culture as of recent. And we thought it was a funny phrase and also touched on a lot of these concepts that we were touching on in this song.
I'll bet you're chomping at the bit to get these things out on stage.
Oh yeah. We've had a lot of pent up energy with nowhere to go except a boxing bag in my garage or something like that. So
the other thing with, not that it was all 2 years of downtime, but with extra downtime than you would normally have, is I would be curious to hear of what sort of grand stage designs, both for immediate future and far future, you guys were able to dream up, because you put some cool shit out on stage. And I can only think, with all that downtime, you had plenty of time to think of more.
Yeah, well, our resident madman, Daniel Oliver, our bass player, has been working on this vision of his the last 2 years. I have a room at his house when I'm in San Antonio, that I stay in, and so out my window while I'm working on music, I can see him and David or Taylor, who are friends of ours that help him out with the metal fabrication, and they're just grinding away all day out in this giant tent in the backyard. He's been building this robot, and you can only imagine what the neighbors are thinking, because you just see this giant, you don't even know what it is, just thing moving around, and like it's like these giant drum canister things that are almost like a squid, with almost tentacle like extensions that will have lights in it, and it's also these mechanical drumsticks that hit it. And so there's been this, it's kind of a piston based system, so it's all firing off. Is that right, Dan? Yeah, pistons. And so it's just been interesting to observe from my little bird's eye view while I'm working in my studio room there, to see it progress. But it's kind of unfolding in ways that a lot of times when we create ideas, we have an initial impulse, or what's the word? We want it to be a certain way, and then it kind of ends up being that. But then as time goes on, it ends up turning into something else that we didn't realize it was going to do. So we're still at the tail end of that phase where it's kind of evolving, and we'll see. We're still working on it as we speak, and it's about to be ready for showtime. So we'll see.
As you're describing that in the backyard, I'm thinking back to some conversations you and Daniel and I have had before. This has been on the drawing board for several years now, I think, because something like this was described to me from you guys before. And I think I said it sounded something like, you ever see the film Wild Wild West with Will Smith?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
there's like a giant spider 10 stories high made of steel or something like that. It sounded like that to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely in that world a bit. And we're trying to, like, one of our goals is to make experiences that don't fall into previous categories or genres. And so when Dan was making this, he's real on the mechanical, kind of the ground floor level of this thing, like how it's going to work, the pragmatic side, like how do we get these pistons to fire, how do we get it to move as quickly as we want, how do we control it with a computer, how do we pack this up with enough crew people without anyone dying because the thing's so giant and heavy. How do we get it in a semi truck? He's answering all these questions day to day. And when I'll go out and check on him, I'm looking at it and thinking through a different lens as to how do we dress this thing up to not make people think of Mad Max or think of, some kind of carnival ride or something that's, kind of what the bones of this thing is, but how do we dress it up and make something new out of this kind of old technology? And so that's kind of what we're aiming for. And it's, like I said, it's still kind of unfolding and revealing what it actually is. But it started as a drum robot, and it's turned into like a light robot. And now it's something in between. And we're about to get into a rehearsal room in a few weeks and just start sussing it out. And he also built a platform on it for me. So I might be standing on this thing, which is very scary because it's way, way higher off the stage than I've ever been. And safety is never Daniel's first concern. So we will see.
I'll remember that when I'm shooting you guys in the photo pit or doing an intro on stage, looking over my shoulder.
Yeah. You gotta look out with this one. It was a danger zone for sure.
Well, a couple of last things, if I may. who was the genius who put together the tour lineup? Because, and I mean genius, because the lineup, it's just such a great complementary slate of bands with you and Asking Alexandria and Atreyu and Eva Under Fire. I mean, that pardon my French, that's a great fucking night of bands.
Yeah, it's weird, you know, whenever we put together a bill, it's never as simple and direct as you might think it is, where you're like, hey, we should tour with this band, we should tour with that band, and then it all just comes together. It really is like we have 10 or 20 bands that we would like to tour with. Um, 4 or 5 of them are on tour already, so they can't do it. You know, 2 of them are either out of our budget or under, you know, the budget in regards to it just doesn't line up right, or we're too close to each other's size where one of the bands doesn't want to do it, they'd rather headline, and then you get into a, you know, bit of a pissing match with who sells more tickets. And you know, so you have all these different things along the way that really weed it down to the final bands that it ends up being. And you know, all these bands are bands that we were happy with and excited about and on the list. But yeah, how it ends up being the final lineup is kind of a crazy thing every time.
Well, listen, it's always great to speak to you. I can't wait to see you out on the road, and also at Rockfest in Cadott, Wisconsin this year. You're coming back for that. Actually, you've had at least one really great gig there, and I think maybe more than one. Any particular memories of Rockfest?
Oh yeah, God, we love Rockfest. Trying to remember, like, I think I ate it pretty hard one year. I think I guess not a good memory, but it was a funny one. Just a lot of times I'll throw water, you know, just getting into it, and I'll have a water bottle in my hand. I'll throw it into the air, just because it's fun and it looks cool. And then sometimes on certain stages, I forget that it just gets really slippery depending on. And what I remember is having like a little. I was rocking out, getting into it, and just ate it super hard. And I just remember bruising my hip like super hard. So the rest of the day, I was just like limping. But man, I remember the people at Rockfest were just always super into it and just super all about it and very kind and cool. So it was always a good experience. Yeah.
Well, look forward to seeing you there. Can't wait for the full-on new record, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Please give my best to the guys and to everybody's families. I hope everybody has come through well out of the recent unpleasantness.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're all on the out right now and all doing good. So thank you for that. Hope you and yours are well too. And we'll see you out there in the real world.